How would you change the current situation?
I'd repeal the 19th Amendment so that women could no longer vote. That would be step one. And then yeah, I'm serious. And then step two is I would get rid of no fault divorce.
You and Pearly things would definitely agree on that. All right, let's bring up
We do agree on that.
So here we go again, another episode where I'm just describing reality somehow means everyone else gets a life script. So, not advice, just, the way things obviously have to be. Apparently, merely describing reality comes with a free set of instructions. No moralizing here, just, you know, letting you know what you'll be doing from now on.
So I don't think that the way to society and essentially to establish rights is necessarily through force.
The only way it can be, well, what happens if you violate somebody's right then?
Begging the question.
I mean, what do you mean what happens?
Well, how do you stop them from doing that?
Here's a false dilemma. Andrew narrows the options to only physical stopping, force, and ignoring other forms of response. So, laws, sanctions, shame, etc. And again, begging the question here also, he's still assuming the only way to stop someone is with force, not considering other methods.
Well, they already did it. What do you mean? How do you stop them?
Well, okay. So I want to take over your country, right?
Why?
Are you just going to let me walk in and do that?
This is a dodge. He moves from the original question to an over-the-top hypothetical. There's this cartoon invasion, shifting the topic from rights in society to a physical conquest. And another false dilemma, he frames the only choices as fight with force or let me walk in, which ignores all real-world complexity.
Well, I mean, why? And again, like, do you really have like the modes of production
Because I
and the
feel like
materials?
it.
I just don't think people wake up and just say, I feel like doing this.
This clip and then the next one also, it's all this back and forth and, well, all the clips really. All the back and forth is happening peacefully in a debate, not by force, and this is basically proving that his own force is all that matters rule doesn't even apply to the current conversation.
Why are we sitting here discussing instead of fighting?
Because right now, the ability to use force is on your side.
This is a red herring and also an argumentum ad baculum. He dodges the direct question, why debate at all, by claiming the opponent's side has force right now. And this is a rhetorical move. He doesn't address why they aren't using violence, he just points to the opponent's supposed power. He also appeals to force's authority. You get to talk because you're backed by force, not because it's right or reasonable.
How so?
Because the rights that you would appeal to are enforced via the law of the land. And so the force doctrine right now, the appeal is on your side. So the system which we have to work within is dialogue based, right?
This is a performative contradiction. He claims they're only debating because the system, force structure, allows it, not because there's value in discussion. But by choosing to engage in dialogue, he's already participating in a system where speech and norms matter, which, as I mentioned earlier, undercuts his own forces everything stance.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if it was reversed, right, you would be in the same exact, you'd have the same exact problem. We would appeal to this thing you consider to be fictitious. The force is now on our side.
He suggests that the opponent would be just as guilty if the power dynamic flipped. This is a logical okay, you can't do it too, is not an actual defense of his position.
We could just, I don't know, say, well, you can't talk at all because we got all the force.
This is a red herring and an argumentum ad baculum. He pivots from argument to threat. We could just silence you with force, he says. This is an intimidation tactic, not a logical reason, and further dodges the moral question.
You could, but I don't see where that gets us. Yeah, you could, if you have the might, then you could do whatever you want.
Because there's no way,
then?
because there's no way in your view for you to say that that's in any way, shape, or form problematic because it's the same thing you're doing.
Here we have circular fatalism. He loops back. Might lets you do whatever you want because rights are just force, repeating his premise as if it's proof. There's a false equivalence. He claims using force to protect rights and using force to suppress rights are identical, ignoring the moral and legal distinction. And there's an is-ought slide, so he blurs can happen with should happen without providing justification. He's just assuming that what can be done is what's allowed.
Falsify it.
Okay, just because someone can do something does not mean that they ought to do it.
Okay, so
Just
then
because
descriptively.
men can force women to do what they want doesn't mean that they ought.
So then descriptively, do you agree with force doctrine?
He dodges the ought by shifting to just description, but in other debates he uses this same description to justify how society should be run. This is an is-ought fallacy. He acts like men are stronger is all it takes to decide who deserves rights. He claims neutrality, but always sneaks in a rule.
Each individual household should also be an instillment of the larger governmental body. It should be a reflection of that, and it
Why?
should be patriarchal in nature because it's part of the descriptive reality of how the world works.
There's an is-ought leap here as well. He starts with a descriptive reality, ends with should be patriarchal, and treats power as the only justification, skipping any moral argument.
But you just said the descriptive reality of right now is that we have the institution. So it's not a descriptive reality of the world right now. Like you just said.
No,
in
it
this
still
dynamic,
is.
people are going to
Still is.
wait. Those men are not all on like one team and then women are all on one team, right? So if you're talking about individual relationships, why the fuck should someone like me be like, oh, you know what? I'm in a relationship with you and we have all the institutions, we have all the power. Most men are on my side, but me and you should still have this dynamic because in Andrew's hypothetical future,
Why would we care what you?
no
Why would we
science.
care what the people without rights say? I don't get it.
What?
Why would we care what the people without rights say?
What do you
Why
mean,
would
why
we
do you
care?
No,
So
I'm
if you have no
asking
voting
you
power,
if
if you have no voting power, why would we
What
care what you say?
There's a bare assertion here and another to Coquet. He sidesteps Jasmine's question by basically mocking her lack of power rather than explaining why she should accept the rule. And we see some circular reasoning. You don't get a say because you don't have rights, but you don't have rights because you don't have a say.
If you're a relativist, you can only appeal to relativism. My worldview has to be just as valid as yours.
He treats relativism like it means every belief is just as good as any other, no matter what, but that's not what it actually says. Relativism means that what's true or right might depend on your situation, culture, or point of view. It does not mean that all ideas are automatically correct or that you can't question or criticize someone else's beliefs. He says, my worldview is just as valid as yours. He is oversimplifying. Most relativists would say, sure, truth can be different in different contexts, but you can still compare, critique, discuss ideas that make sense or fit together. So it's not anything goes, and it does not make all worldviews equally strong.
So then, therefore, we both appeal to physical force. What else could we ever appeal to?
Here we have a non sequitur. He concludes that physical force must be the basis of appeal, without logically justifying why force is the only available option.
I honestly, I am not totally sure how we get from there to appealing to physical force.
Because what else could you appeal to other than just an enforcement to your preferences?
Here we have an argument from ignorance. Just because you can't imagine an alternative doesn't mean that none exist.
Appeal to for what? For like
For any ought. Every ought would just become force. You would just say the things I want to see different in the world are because I want to see them different in the world. And then that would require force.
And we have a slippery slope. He claims that any moral ought, so what you want to change in the world, always ends up requiring force. That skips over all the ways people can persuade, negotiate, or peacefully change things without using force.
So relativism will reduce to a force doctrine.
And we have another case of circular reasoning. He says relativism will just turn into my force doctrine, but never actually proves it. He just assumes it's true from the start and repeats it like a conclusion.
But I'm curious why Christian ethics wouldn't also reduce to a force doctrine.
Well, the Christian ethic can make a determination between an is and an ought.
And we have a case of special pleading. When someone points out that Christian ethics could also be about force, he just says, oh, it's different because it can separate is from ought. But he doesn't explain why or how. He's just making a special exception for his own view without any real reason. Overall, in this segment, we have him misrepresenting relativism and acting like force is the only way to make rules. He relies on shaky logic and tricks to prop up his argument, but it falls apart if you look closely.
If you see, so you don't make this as a moral claim. It's just kind of
It's a descriptive claim. No, it's not. It's just a descriptive.
So do you think that men should work to cooperate with women in society?
No, I think women should cooperate with men in society because they
What
depend
does
on.
co mean?
Yeah, I'll explain. I think that women depend on men for the use of force doctrine for their own protection.
We have another is-ought fallacy. He says he's just describing how things are, but then tells women what they should do. So he jumps from facts to moral rules without a good reason. And we have a hidden prescription here. He acts like women should cooperate with men. It's just the way things are, but really he's treating it like a rule everyone should follow. He is contradicting himself. He says he's not making moral claims, then turns around and gives one. So his position does not add up. We have a power equals right. He acts like whoever has power automatically deserves to be in charge, as if might makes right. That's a shaky way to justify authority. And wait a minute, didn't he say he's not saying might makes right over and over and over again earlier? See previous episodes.
But what about in terms of ought to? Do you believe that women ought to have rights as well, or you're just talking purely about the what is?
Well, I've already covered that, right? So yes, of course, I think that they ought to have the same rights
Okay.
ordinarily that I would ascribe in a Christian virtue ethic to anybody. Sure.
Okay. Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't think that that's in any way contrasted to anything I say.
No,
I'm
it's
just
not.
saying that even then, I would still understand on the is front that those rights, whether I think they come from God or not, um, I still believe that men would be the ones who are going to ultimately be the enforcement arm for them, and the ones who could take them away from me or give them to me whenever they so choose to do so, which historically they've done many times.
We have another is-ought jump over here. He says men have all the power, and that's just a fact, but suddenly claims women should have rights without explaining why that should follow from the power dynamic. The moral rule, so the ought, appears out of nowhere. A self-contradiction pops up here. In other debates, he claims that rights aren't real or should even be taken away. So, if rights don't exist, what does it even mean to say women ought to have them? He is contradicting himself. We have source confusion here. He throws the idea that maybe rights come from God, but that just makes it messier. So if God gives rights, then people, aka men, because men grant rights, right? So if God gives rights, then men shouldn't be able to take them away. If men can just erase rights, then God clearly isn't the real source. So why even bring God up here, I wonder? Just to sound like he's covering all bases. Either way, it doesn't fit. So why even mention it?
You're talking about a descriptor of is and ought. It is true. We go through life with all sorts of kind of presuppositions and suppositions which aren't true all the time to get through the day. We do this all the time.
Here we have an equivocation. He starts out talking about the difference between what is, the facts, and what ought to be, the morals. But then quickly shifts to, well, we all make guesses just to get through life. He's mixing up talking about big philosophical issues with just making everyday assumptions, which are not the same thing at all.
For instance, there's no real reason for you to go in and turn your car on and think it's going to start, except that you're a pattern recognition machine and it's always started, and so you assume that it's going to start.
And we have a false analogy. He says you'd expect your car to start because it always does, and tries to use that as an example for how we have moral beliefs. But that's not the same thing. Trusting your car is about patterns and evidence, and morality, it's not just about habits or repetition.
If you had some pre-knowledge that it wouldn't, you would have taken the steps to make sure that the next day you got in and it would start, right? Everything that you do in your life as you're going through it is built on all sorts of unfounded suppositions that probably aren't true at all.
And this is a hasty generalization. He claims that everything you do is based on unfounded guesses, which is a big stretch. We actually do a lot based on facts, reasons, and evidence, not just random assumptions.
But we still act as though they are in order to have a society. But eventually, what ends up happening is we do have to face down actual facts and actual reality. And in actual reality, if you end up with too much internal conflict,
based around this egalitarian system.
And another slippery slope. He warns that if you have too much commitment to equality, it will automatically lead to chaos and internal conflict. He doesn't prove it, he just assumes it will always turn out badly, which is not justified. So in this clip, he was trying to defend his force doctrine by blending together stuff that just doesn't match, acting like practical day-to-day shortcuts are the same thing as deep moral truths, and making big leaps without proof. The argument falls apart because he uses bad comparisons and skips over the important differences between facts, assumptions, and values. It's just all one big pile.
In the atheist worldview, anything, right, that's outside of complete natural mechanisms is arbitrary and made up and non-objective, including their belief that Christianity is completely made up or Islam is completely made up. They think all these things are completely made up. The problem is that the things that they appeal to, human rights, human dignity, right? That's all completely made up too from their view. So if it's the case that they'll defend those things with force, what leg do they have to stand on to say that Muslims or Christians can't defend their values also with force?
Here he's sliding from describing rights as inventions, so there is, to endorsing violence to defend them, so the ought. Another is ought over here. The leap from this is how the world works, so therefore it's fine to kill over it. Textbook is ought.
And their values with force.
Yeah.
So wait, so you think that it's okay to bomb a church because that's their values?
If arguing is so pointless, Andrew, why are you here talking instead of LARPing as a medieval warlord? Maybe words do matter after all.